Assalamu alaikum and welcome parents, lovely teachers and all adults to this Radiant Hearts lesson. In this lesson, I intend to cover chapter 3 of the book of fasting, and I have divided this chapter into 3 parts. This is part 1. In order to fully benefit from all the gems and all the lessons that we can derive from this chapter. So let's begin. Alhamdulillahillazi ja'ala as-sawma hisnan wa junna wa salatu ala sayyidil anbiya Muhammadinil Mustafa wa ala alihil mujtaba wa ashabihi ajma'in. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allah says in the Quran in Surah Baqarah, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyamu kama kutiba ala allazina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. O you who believe, fasting is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you can attain taqwa, piety. Or you can actually become mindful, always be mindful of Allah. So Ramadan is a month in which we learn this essential sort of question: what steps do I need to take to keep a truly spiritual fast? Your children, after listening to these lessons, should be able to answer that question, and so should you. Ramadan comes from the word Ramada. Ramada means to scorch or to burn. In Persian, pure gold is called kundan. When gold is put in a furnace and it is burnt, all the impurities leave it, and all that is left is pure gold. In order to purify something, you sometimes have to put it through some harshness. And that's what the purpose of Ramadan is. It truly cleans us. And in order for us to understand the mysteries and the inner practices of fasting, it is important first that we realize that fasting is such a beautiful worship. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam says that kullu amal ibni adama yudaifu al-hasana bi ashri amthaliha, that all the deeds of the children of the son of Adam is multiplied about 10 to 700 times, ila sab'amiyati da'fin, about 10 to 700 times, except fasting. Qala Allah. So this means it's a hadith Qudsi, which means that Allah is saying, but Rasulullah is narrating it to us. That is what is meant by a hadith Qudsi. Illa as-sawm fa innahu li wa ana ajzi bihi. Indeed, fasting is for me, and I shall reward it. So, and I alone wa ana ajzi bihi, and I alone will reward it. So So every good deed that we do, the reward of it is either given to us times 10 or times 700, depends on the deed. However, the reward of fasting is such that a number couldn't be put to it. So we couldn't say, oh, you'll get 1,000 times reward or 2,000 times. We couldn't say it. That is how great the reward of fasting is. Now, in order to answer that first question, is that how does fasting train us spiritually? First, we need to know what spirit is. What do we mean by spiritual training? In order to understand that, we need to know how our spiritual self, which I am going to refer to as the nafs, acts. How does your nafs function? The nafs is of 3 types. Nafsullahwama bis-su. It is that part of your nafs, or it is that nafs which is forever controlling you. It is forever inclining you to do what is sinful. The second type of nafs, or your spiritual self or your spirit, is Nafsullahwama. This is that type of nafs that sometimes you can control, and most of the times you can discipline it and say no. But sometimes it overpowers you and you give in to sin. The third is Nafsul Mutma'inna. This is a nafs that is forever you're in complete control of your spiritual self. You don't even want to commit what is forbidden or what is wrong. That is a nafs, that is a lifelong struggle to achieve. Our job in Ramadan for us, by learning the inner practices of fasting, is to reach and constantly stay in this state and never let our nafs or our spiritual self, our inner self, revert back to an-nafsullahwama bisu. So this is our aim, an-nafsullahwama. Now, in order to keep our spirit or our spiritual self at nafsullahwama, Allah has given us fasting. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Wasawmul junna." Fasting is a shield. Now, how does fasting act like a shield so that we stay at this end? It needs explaining. So basically, we need to understand how our shahawat work. Shahawat is our lower desires. When we are satiated and quenched, which means that our bellies are full, we are content, everything is just, we're basically full of food and drink. It is that time that feeling and sensation, it gives rise to this part of the nafs, which means that the shaitan can really influence you when you are satiated and quenched. This is the time when the whisperings of the shaitan really work on us. And Rasulullah explained this by telling us that in the shaitan liyajri min ibn Adam majrad dam, that indeed the shaitan or the whisperings or the influence of the shaitan is such that he influences us like our blood flows through our veins. فَالضَّيِّقُ مُجَارِيَ بِالْجُوعِ. So constrict its influence, stop the influence of the shaitan by hunger. Sayyida Aisha, hadith narrated from Sayyida Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, Rasulullah said to her, "Ya Aisha, dawimi qar'a babil Jannah." Keep knocking on the door of Jannah. And Sayyida Aisha said, "Limaza ya Rasulallah, how?" And Rasulullah said, "Bil-ju'," with hunger. So, in order to revise this, when you have a slight amount of hunger or a slight amount of thirst, it is very difficult for shaitan to do its whisperings. Hence, it acts like a shield, because when shaitan cannot influence our nafs, we are less inclined to do sinful things. Our nafs stays at this level of nafsullahwama. So this is actually a technical way of understanding how spiritual training works. That takes me nicely to this part of what your children will learn, what we call ثلاث درجات الصوم, 3 levels of fasting. There's a fasting of the umum, which means this is the fast that most people keep. Yeah, this is what you call staying away from water or eating and drinking and any marital relationships. This is the level of fasting that the legal rulings of fasting apply. What will break the fast, what will not break the fast, legally, not spiritually. Then it is Sawmul Khusus, fasting of the elect. This is the spiritual fast. This is the fasting of your whole person, your eyes, your ears, your nose, your thinking, your limbs. All of this is covered in that part of the fasting. If this fast is broken, it vitiates the spiritual reward of the fast, which means you do not benefit from the spiritual reward of the fast. Then is the fasting of the elect, Sawmu Khusus al-Khusus. This is the kind of fasting, this is a fasting of your heart, which means that you keep away from all the lowly and unworthy worldly desires and worldly concerns. For example, you will wake up and go to work. You are working so that you can provide a halal income for your family and those who are dependent on you. because Allah has commanded so. You will sleep so that you can wake up and be, you can have all your energy to worship Allah. You will do everything only for the sake of Allah. This fast is never opened. It is only opened at liqa ilallah, when you will meet whom you seek, Allah Azza wa Jal. This is that fast. This is the fast of the prophets, alayhi salatu wassalam. This is the fast of the muqarribun, the salihun. This is a fast that we can only aim towards. So our lesson in this lesson is to train us to keep this fast here, Sawmul Khusus, fasting of the elect. If you don't, this is an obligated fast. This is what we need to keep. This is what the law demands. This is what fiqh governs. This is what needs to be aspired to. So how can we keep a Sawm of the elect? How can we keep a fast what has been kept by the elect? And let's first sort of, because if we keep this fast, Sawm al-Khusus al-Khusus, these are those people about whom Allah has said in the Quran, قُلِ اللَّهِ ثُمَّ ذَرْهُمْ فِي خَوْضِهِمْ يَلْعَبُونَ. They say Allah. Everything is for Allah. And then they leave everything else, يَلْعَبُونَ. So, and then everything else that can be considered as in being involved in idle amusement. Yal'abun, la'ib is to be amused or to play. Basically, la'ib is play in Arabic. But here it is meant is that you leave behind everything that is worldly, materialistic, and your heart is focused towards Allah. This verse was said for those who keep, this is for those who keep the fast of the elect of the elect. So I'll come back to what I was saying is that we are focusing on the Sawm al-Khusus. So, how do we do that? There are 6 practices that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam advised us, and then Imam Ghazali explained in his book Kitab Asrar al-Sawm, which tell us what are the inner practices of fasting. How can we keep our nafs to Nafsullahwama? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, خَمْسٌ يَفْطُرْنَ السَّائِمِ. 5 things vitiate the spiritual reward of a fast. Remember, now whenever I say it will break your fast, I don't mean your legal fast. I mean that you will not benefit from the barakah of the spiritual reward such that all you will gain is a hunger and thirst. Your legal fast will not be broken, but your spiritual fast will be. Ghiba, backbiting, namima, slander, wa kizb, lying, wa yaminul kadhiba, and swearing a false oath, wa nazar bil shahwa, and a lustful gaze. So I will start with nazar with shahwa. Rasulullah also says, a nazara, a sinful glance, something that you shouldn't be looking at to discipline your nafs, and yet you're carrying on looking at it. It is sahmun masmumun min sihamil iblis. It is a poisoned arrow from the arrows of Iblis. فَمَنْ تَرَكَهَا خَوْفًا مِنَ اللَّهِ. And the one who controls his gaze purely because to please Allah, because he's mindful or she's mindful of Allah. أَتَى اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلْ إِيمَانًا يَجِدُ هِلَاوَتَهُ فِي قَلْبِهِ. That Allah will then reward such a person with such certitude of faith. The sweetness of that faith will always be perceived with a contented heart. You will see the state of yourself change, the contentment you will feel, and the sweetness, the peace you will feel in your heart. Our eyes are the first thing that we need to control when we keep a spiritual fast. Our eyes are the doors to our soul. What we see influences us in far greater way than if something we read or we hear about. It is not the same as seeing. That is why it says seeing is believing, because it really influences us and it makes us change what we think about things, decisions that we make. And These days, we don't have to go very far to see things, do we? Everything is in the palm of our hands, whether it's a smartphone or a tablet or an iPad or whatever you have, you can see whatever you want right there. This is what in this day and age is the fasting of the eyes, is to stop your screen time when you're fasting. Stop browsing when you want to do shopping. That's literally adding that shahwa. I want this, I want that, because I've seen it, I want it now. Stop watching cookery programs, because if you watch Bake Off, you want to either eat the cake or bake it. It can't be good, it can't be healthy. Stop watching things that you know your shahwa is weak towards, that your Nafsullahwama bisu inclines you to do that. Control yourself in Ramadan. This is training. Because remember, Ramadan is a month that if for 30 days we practice a spiritual fast, we discipline our souls so much that at the end of the 30 days, the only thing that should be really introduced back in our lives is eating and drinking. All the other things that I'm going to teach you now, the 6 things that we can control, if we can start practicing controlling them in Ramadan, 30 days is enough. It is enough to discipline the soul. So reduce your screen time, or give up a smartphone if you can, and just go to a regular phone or something. Because really it all starts by looking at things, mostly on social media. And that's why we are inclined to do wrong things these days. The second thing that is very, very important is fasting of the mouth. So first was fasting of the eyes. The second is fasting of the mouth. The fasting of the mouth is, of course, very nicely written down here, as Haj Abdullah is teaching the children so beautifully: lying, backbiting, slander. But remember there's a difference between ghiba and namima. Ghiba, so fasting of the tongue is not to do ghiba and namima or kizbul yamin. So all of this happens by your tongue. Ghiba is talking about somebody behind their back. That's something that they would not like, and it is the truth. It's not a lie. Namima is slander, saying something wrong about something, wrong about someone that they have actually not said. So gossiping includes both ghiba and namima. You may be saying partially things about somebody who's not there, that is true, but often a little bit of spice is added to it. That makes it namima. Slander has grave punishment in our religion. Grave punishment. So Rasulullah said, fasting is a shield. الصيام جنة فإذا كان أحدكم صائما فلا يرفث ولا يجهل فإن امرؤ قاتله أو شاتمه فليقل إني صائم إني صائم. If you remember nothing from my lesson today, remember this one thing. Inni sa'im, inni sa'im. I am fasting, I'm fasting. If somebody tries to argue with you, if somebody tries to get you into a gossiping mode, maybe at work, over in your lunch break, in a cup of tea, oh, do you hear such and such? Did you hear about this? Such and such. Do you know what she said or what he said? Your reply should be, Inni sa'im, I'm fasting. I'm fasting, sorry, can't listen to you right now. And when I'll go to the virtue of the week, I'll tell you in a little bit more detail what I mean by how to control this gossiping. That's your virtue of the week. So control yourself. And Rasulullah gave us a very vivid visual example, which is given here in this book as well, that there were 2 women, they were fasting and they started gossiping or talking about some other people, and suddenly they became so ill. Remember, they became ill. The barakah, the spiritual reward of the fast is gone. They were gossiping. When that happens, you start feeling hungry and thirsty. So if during fasting you often feel great hunger and great thirst, question yourself. Have you broken your spiritual fast? Question yourself. And so so they were feeling very ill. The Sahaba went to Rasulullah and said, Ya Rasulullah, they are so ill that we fear that they are going to die. Rasulullah took a bowl, asked the Sahaba to give it to these 2 women, and asked them to try to vomit into that. The first woman vomited and she filled half the bowl. And the second woman was given the same bowl. She vomited in it and she filled the whole bowl up to the brink. Rasulullah knew exactly the amount, of the bowl. And what was in it? It was blood and rotten bits of flesh. And the Sahaba were horrified. The women straight away felt very, very good. They felt better just by vomiting it out. And Rasulullah said, this is exactly what they were consuming. They were talking about their brethren or their sisters behind their backs. And it is like taking bits of flesh out of their body. And it's a very vivid example. And there's a reason a visual vivid example is used, because remember, seeing is believing. You will never forget what you see. The eyes influence you. So that example, and then Rasulullah said, Hatani samata amma ahlallahu lahuma. That these two women fasted from what Allah had made halal from them. Eating, drinking is halal for us. Only in Ramadan we have to stop, sunrise to sunset. But they broke their fast, what was haram even without fasting. Gossiping, slander, backbiting, namima, all of this is haram for us even if we are not fasting. So we have to train ourselves. And how? That brings me very nicely to the virtue of the week. How do we do that? We do that by... So please, let's make this very clear here. Slandering and gossip and backbiting is not a discussion you need to have with your employer when you are in an appraisal and you need to bring in a matter in disciplinary procedures at work, when you're being counseled to a counselor. You have to talk about people who have wronged you, because if you stay quiet against people who are wronging you in a counseling session, that itself is a sin. You cannot stay quiet against dhulm. That is a sin. So in a professional environment, it is not gossip. It is necessary. When you need to tell your boss about in a professional setting, how the work of somebody is influencing your work, or how... So all of this is not considered gossiping. This is required by law to carry on the functions and the business of the world. In staff appraisals, this and that. So please, let's not confuse that with gossiping. Gossiping is primarily talking for the sake of talking when it is not required, when it is not obligated on you. Yes? This is when you are having a cup of tea with a colleague and you say, oh, do you know such and such said this? By you listening to this such and such story, it will not add to the productivity of your day. It will actually just add a bad feeling. And remember, whenever you have gossiped, you always have this slightly bad feeling about, I shouldn't have said that about that person, should I? But I did it anyway. Don't listen to it. Listening to gossip is as bad as doing it, but I'll cover that in the next lesson. Try to stay away from idle prattling is the word. Talking for the sake of talking about people in company, and avoid such company that you will end up talking like that. Avoid that company. Start in Ramadan, 30 days you do that, trust me, the habit will become solid. So, because when you're gossiping about somebody, you are disrespecting them. So this is your virtue of the week that you need to practice this week. And until the next lesson, inshallah, I will see you with the other virtues that we need to practice. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.